Rain made the city look honest. It wasn't. The water only smeared the dirt across the pavement, turning the streets of Seattle into long black mirrors reflecting neon lights and secrets people pretended didn't exist. Inside Bellissimo, one of the most expensive Italian restaurants in the city, the lighting was warm, the music soft, and the lies expensive. Catherine Hale moved quietly between tables with a water pitcher in her hand. No one noticed her. That was the point. She wore a simple black apron with a small stain near the pocket where wine had spilled earlier in the evening. Her dark hair was tied back into a loose bun, and her expression carried the calm exhaustion of someone who had learned long ago that survival required silence. Catherine had mastered invisibility. Rich men didn't see waitresses. They saw wine bottles, menus, but never the woman refilling their glass. Which meant Catherine heard everything. That threat, rides. Tonight felt different. The air carried tension the way the sky carries lightning before a storm. She noticed it the moment the black SUVs pulled up outside. 3 of them. Large. Armored. Expensive enough that even the restaurant managers stopped polishing glasses to stare. The front door opened, and the temperature in the room dropped. Thomas Vescari stepped inside. People didn't whisper his name. They avoided saying it at all. Thomas was the man who owned the docks, the nightclubs, half the shipping companies on the coast, and if the rumors were true, most of the politicians who claimed to fight crime. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked handmade. His dark hair was slicked back. His eyes were sharp and calm. The kind of calm that belonged to men who had survived too many wars to fear another. 4 men walked behind him. Bodyguards? Blurred. Silent. Dangerous. The restaurant manager nearly sprinted to greet him. Mr. Vescari, the man said with a nervous smile, your private table is ready. Thomas didn't answer. He simply scanned the room. Every exit. Every corner. Every face. His eyes paused on Catherine for half a second. Then moved on. There's a mess. She lowered her gaze and walked toward the table with a pitcher of water. Invisible again. Water, one of the bodyguards grunted. Yes, sir. Her voice was quiet. Steady. She poured each glass carefully. The men spoke in low voices. But Catherine's hearing had always been sharper than people expected. Shipment was lighter than expected, one of the advisors murmured. Thomas didn't look surprised. Someone's stealing, he said calmly. His voice was smooth, controlled. But they won't enjoy what happens next. The man beside him shifted nervously. We'll investigate. No, Thomas replied. We'll make an example. Catherine placed the final glass on the table. As she turned to leave, her wrist brushed lightly against Thomas's sleeve. His hand moved instantly. He grabbed her wrist. Not violently, but firmly enough that the pitcher nearly slipped from her grip. The bodyguards half rose from their chairs, hands near their jackets. Thomas studied her hand. Her palm had faint calluses, thin scars along 2 fingers. Not the hands of someone who spent life carrying plates. Careful, he said. Catherine met his gaze for a moment. Her voice remained calm. Sorry, sir. Something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity. Then he released her. She walked away. Oh, controlled. But inside her chest her heart beat faster. Not because she feared him. Because she had just made herself visible. And invisibility was the only thing that had kept her alive for 3 years. The restaurant grew busier as the evening continued. Wine glasses clinked. Laughter returned. But the tension never fully disappeared. Catherine wiped down the bar counter while watching reflections in the mirror behind the liquor shelves. Years ago her father had taught her something important. Never watch the danger directly. Watch its reflection. That's how she saw them. 4 men entering the restaurant. Long coats. Heavy steps. Eyes scanning the room. Not customers. Not businessmen. They walked with quiet precision. Military. Or mercenary. Catherine's stomach tightened. The men ignored the host. Ignored the menu stand. They moved directly toward Thomas's private booth. Her mind started calculating. Distance. Annuals. Exit. The lead man slipped his hand inside his coat. Catherine saw the matte black cylinder before anyone else did. A suppressor. Her brain screamed one word. Everything slowed. A bodyguard noticed too late. Two soft pops echoed through the restaurant. One guard collapsed instantly. A small hole in his forehead. The second fell across the table, choking on blood. Screams erupted. People dove under tables. Wine glasses shatter. The assassin spread out quickly, forming a deadly half-circle around Thomas. Professional. Avizant. Thomas flipped the heavy oak table onto its side. But he was unarmed. The lead assassin stepped closer. Raised his pistol. You should have stayed out of Russian territory, the man said. Thomas said nothing. He simply stared back. Out of rage. The assassin smirked. His finger tightened on the trigger. 10 feet away, Catherine crouched behind the bar. Her mind told her to run. Out the kitchen door. Disappear. Start over somewhere else. That had been her plan for years. Stay invisible. Stay alive. But then she saw something. A pistol lying on the floor. One of the dead bodyguards had dropped it. 5 feet away. The assassin's gun aimed directly at Thomas's chest. Catherine's father had once told her something. Silence becomes guilt the moment you know someone will die. Her body moved before her mind agreed. She slid across the polished floor. Her hand grabbed the gun. Hold! Have it! Familiar. The assassin turned. Too late. Catherine raised the pistol with steady hands. She exhaled slowly. 3 shots thundered across the restaurant. The first struck the assassin's shoulder. The second hit his chest. The third pierced his throat. He collapsed instantly. The other gunmen spun toward her. Shock spread across their faces. The waitress wasn't supposed to be part of the fight. Killed her, one shouted. Catherine ducked behind the bar as bullets shattered bottles above her head. Glass rained down. Across the room, Thomas stared at her. Not confused. Not panicked. Studying her. The way generals watch soldiers. She popped up and fired twice. 2 gunmen dove for cover. Hitson, she shallous. Thomas didn't argue. He read. Catherine moved with precise efficiency. Firing. Reloading. Covering his escape. Then she sprinted after him through the swinging kitchen doors. Chefs and dishwashers hid behind counters. Thomas grabbed 2 knives from a magnetic strip on the wall. Catherine pushed open the back door. Cold rain slammed into them. The alley was dark. Quiet. Empty. For 2 seconds. Then the door behind them burst open. 2 remaining assassins rushed outside. Catherine raised the pistol. What? The slide locked back. Empty. Thou best. She cleared the jam in a single motion. Fired twice. The men dove back inside. Run, she said. Thomas grabbed her arm. We fight? She glared at him. You have knives, they have rifles. A car engine roared at the end of the alley. Headlights turned toward them. Another ambush? Catherine raised the gun again. Her voice calm. Okay, she muttered. Now we fight. The headlights flooded the alley like a spotlight. For a split second, Catherine could see everything clearly, the rain bouncing off the pavement, the smoke drifting from the restaurant door, Thomas standing beside her gripping 2 kitchen knives like a man who had decided he would rather die fighting than run. The black sedan rolled forward slowly. Too slowly. Not police. Professionals. Catherine lifted the stolen pistol and aimed straight through the windshield. She didn't aim for the man holding the gun. She aimed for the driver. Her father had drilled that lesson into her years ago. Disable the machine. Not the weapon. 2 shots cracked through the rain. The windshield exploded into a spiderweb of shattered glass. The sedan swerved violently. The driver collapsed against the steering wheel. dead before the car slammed sideways into a metal dumpster with a brutal metallic crash. The passenger door burst open. A gunman stumbled out, half-dazed but reaching for the submachine gun slung across his chest. Thomas stepped forward instinctively. But Catherine was faster. She fired again. One shot. The man collapsed beside the smoking engine. Silence returned to the alley. Except for rain. And their breathing. Thomas stared at her. Not with fear. Not even with shock. But with the cold, analytical interest of a man who had just discovered a weapon he didn't know existed. You're not a waitress, he said quietly. Catherine didn't answer. Instead, she jogged toward the crashed sedan and dragged the driver's body halfway out of the seat. The man wore tactical gear. Professional hit squad. She shoved the body aside and slid behind the wheel. Dead end. Thomas blinked once. Then obey. The engine roared to life. Hold on, she muttered. The tires screeched as she reversed hard, spinning the sedan in a perfect half circle before blasting out of the alley. Thomas grabbed the dashboard as the car shot onto the main road. Where did you learn to drive like that? Same place I learned to shoot. And where was that? Not Waitress school. The city blurred past them. Rain streaked across the windshield. Catherine checked the rearview mirror. Nothing. Then flashing headlights appeared 2 blocks behind them. An SUV. What? Us? Company, she muttered. Thomas twisted around to look. Recognition hardened his expression. Volkov's men. Well, the Ness. Catherine accelerated. The SUV closed the distance quickly. Its engine roared like a predator. They're going to ram us, Thomas said. Let them try. The SUV surged forward. Just as the bumper nearly touched their rear fender, Catherine slammed the brakes. The maneuver was sudden and brutal. The SUV driver reacted too late. The vehicle clipped their bumper, lost traction on the rain-slick street, and spun violently across 2 lanes before smashing into a streetlight with a thunderous crunch. Catherine didn't even look back. She took 3 quick turns through narrow side streets. Then another. Then another. 20 minutes later, the city grew quieter. Industrial buildings replaced restaurants. Neon lights faded into rusted warehouses. Finally, Catherine pulled into a narrow alley behind an old brick apartment building. She turned off the engine. Silence filled the car. Thomas studied her again. You plan that route. I plan all my routes. Why? She looked at him. Because sometimes people try to kill you. He almost smiled. Catherine's apartment was small. A converted storage loft with exposed brick walls and a single dim overhead light. The furniture was minimal. A mattress. A chair. A table covered in mechanical parts. No photographs. No decorations. No evidence of a life lived comfortably. Thomas stepped inside slowly. You live here? For now. You expecting guests often? Only the ones trying to kill me. She locked the door. Then slid 3 heavy deadbolts into place. Thomas noticed the locks immediately. Reinforced steel. Military grade. Interesting. Catherine walked to the sink and washed the gunpowder residue from her hands. The water ran gray. Thomas leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You saved my life. You were in no way. That's not what it looked like. She turned off the water. You were about to die in a restaurant full of civilians. That would have been messy. Thomas tilted his head slightly. You risked your life for strangers. No. For the principle. He studied her quietly. Years of running a criminal empire had taught him how to rid people. Rid. Ambition. But Catherine carried none of those signals. She moved like someone trained. Disciplined. And tired. Very tired. What's your name? He asked. She hesitated. Catherine. Catherine what? Just Catherine. Thomas pushed away from the wall and stepped closer. Not threatening. Just curious. Catherine, he said slowly, you cleared a weapon malfunction in under a second. You drove like a professional pursuit driver. You carry yourself like someone who's spent years in dangerous places. He stopped a few feet away. So I'll ask again. Who are you? Catherine picked up the pistol and began disassembling it on the table. Her hands moved calmly. Waitress. My father was a security contractor, she said quietly. Military. What? Where is he now? She paused, then finished removing the sly. The? Thomas watched her carefully. There was no performance in her voice, only an old wound. What happened? A job in the Middle East. And you became a waitress afterward? I became invisible. He nodded slowly. That answer made sense. For the first time that night, silence between them felt calm rather than tense. Until Thomas spoke again. There's a leak. In your organization. Ness? Who knew you were at the restaurant tonight? My inner circle. Naos. He hesitated, then answered. My consigliere Silvio, my head of security Damon, and my younger brother Marco. Catherine considered that. Then one of them tried to kill you. Thomas's jaw tightened. I know. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I took this from the driver in the alley. Thomas unfolded it. It was a printed map. A route leading toward the harbor. Warehouse numbers circled in red. His eyes narrowed instantly. My shipment. Then I? Ness. They didn't just want you dead, Catherine said quietly. They wanted you distracted. Realization dawned across Thomas's face. A coup. Exactly. Someone inside his organization had orchestrated the assassination attempt while simultaneously stealing his cargo. A double strike. Only at this hint. Ruthless. Thomas crushed the paper in his fists. I'm going to the docks. You can't. Watch me. You have no army, Catherine said calmly. Your men are either compromised or dead. Thomas looked at her. Then what do you suggest? Catherine slipped the pistol back together. The metal clicked softly. She checked the chamber, then tucked the weapon into the back of her jeans. You're the king of the city, right? That's what people say. Then tonight you act like a general. She grabbed her leather jacket. We intercept the shipment. Thomas blinked. You're coming with me? She opened the door. Rain still fell outside. I was trying to live a quiet life, she said. Then she looked back at him. But you just turned my restaurant into a battlefield. A faint, dangerous smile touched her lips. So now I'm invested. Thomas stared at the woman who had been pouring water an hour earlier. And for the first time that night, Thomas Vescari laughed. All right, Catherine, he said. Let's go find the traitor. The harbor looked like a city of steel. Towering cranes stretched into the rainy night like skeletons, their metal arms hanging over rows of shipping containers stacked 5 stories high. Sodium lights buzzed overhead, casting sickly yellow reflections across puddles and rusts. The docks never truly slept. But tonight the place felt tense. Too quiet. Catherine parked the stolen sedan 2 blocks away from the main warehouse complex. She turned off the headlights long before they reached the perimeter. Thomas watched her through the dim glow of the dashboard. You've done this before. Something like it. She stepped out of the car. Cold wind from the ocean pushed rain sideways through the empty lot. In the distance, Warehouse 17 stood illuminated beneath a row of floodlights. Trucks were parked outside. Armed guards paced along the loading dock. Thomas narrowed his eyes. Those aren't my men. No, Catherine said. They're Russians. He looked at her sharply. You recognize them? The tattoos on their necks. She pointed subtly toward the warehouse entrance. 2 guards stood under the awning, rifles slung lazily across their shoulders. Blue star tattoos. Russian syndicate. Thomas exhaled slowly. Viktor Malenkov. The one trying to take your territory? Yes. And the one who hired the assassins tonight. Catherine nodded. Which means your traitor is inside that warehouse. Thomas flexed his hands. Anger burned behind his calm expression. That? Catherine looked at him. You're not planning to walk in through the front door. That's usually how I solve problems. Tonight you're not a king, she said. You bait. Thomas studied her. The strange thing was, he didn't feel insulted. He felt curious. Then what's your plan? She pointed toward the maze of shipping containers. We go through the shadows. They moved between containers like ghosts. Catherine walked ahead, her movements smooth and silent. She used hand signals Thomas somehow understood instinctively. Is that? No. What? Where? Years of survival had turned her into something precise. Something controlled. Thomas realized something else too. He was listening to her. That had never happened before. They reached the side entrance of the warehouse. 2 guards stood nearby smoking cigarettes. Their rifles leaned casually against the wall beside them. Catherine crouched behind a container. She picked up a small metal bolt from the ground. Thomas raised an eyebrow. She tossed it across the yard. What? The sound echoed sharply. Both guards turned. One walked away from the door toward the noise. The other stayed behind. That was enough. Catherine moved first. She crossed the distance in 3 silent strides and slammed the pistol grip against the guard's temple. He collapsed instantly. At the same moment, Thomas surged forward. His hand grabbed the second guard by the back of his vest and slammed him face first into the metal container wall. The man dropped like a sack of sand. Thomas grabbed the rifle. Efficient, he muttered. Catherine dragged the unconscious guard behind a stack of crates. Less talking. They slipped inside. The interior of the warehouse was massive. Rows of containers formed narrow corridors like a steel labyrinth. Forklifts sat idle. The smell of diesel and salt water filled the air. Voices echoed near the center of the building. Catherine and Thomas crouched behind a crate. From their position they could see the meeting. 3 Russian gunmen stood guard near a stack of cargo pallets. And beside them, a man in a tailored coat held a small silver flash drive. Thomas froze. His voice dropped to a whisper. Silvio. Catherine glanced at him. Your consigliere? Ness? Silvio had been with Thomas's family for 20 years. He helped run the organization after Thomas's father died. He had been trusted with everything. Now he was shaking hands with Viktor Malenkov. The Russian crime lord was a thick-set man with a shaved head and heavy gold rings on every finger. He smiled like a shark. Pleasure doing business, Malenkov said. Silvio handed him the flash drive. Everything you need is on there. Bank routes, custom schedules, warehouse codes. Cross's entire operation. Thomas felt something inside his chest turn cold. Betrayal always hurt. But betrayal from family. That was different. Malenkov laughed. And Thomas? Silvio smiled. My sources say he's already dead. Thomas stepped out from behind a crate. You should double-check your sources. Silence crushed the warehouse. Silvio spun around. His face drained of color. Thomas. Malenkov's eyes widened. The Russian boss reacted instantly. Kill him. Gunfire erupted. Bullets slammed into crates and forklifts. Thomas dug behind a container and fired the stolen rifle. 1 Russian dropped from the catwalk above. Catherine moved in the opposite direction. She climbed the stacked pallets beside her, gaining a higher vantage point. From above she could see the entire floor. 3 gunmen. 2 moving toward Thomas. 1 covering the exit. She took a breath, then squeezed the trigger. 2 controlled shots. 2 gunmen collapsed. The third looked up too late. Another shot. He fell. The sudden silence rang louder than the gunfire. Across the warehouse, Silvio ran for the office staircase. He is escaping, Catherine shouted. Thomas surged forward. I'll handle him. Oh! The office overlooked the warehouse floor through a large glass wall. Silvio fumbled with the door lock when Thomas kicked the door open. The traitor froze. His expensive coat looked ridiculous now. Fear had stripped away his confidence. Thomas listened. Don't. Thomas stepped inside slowly. You tried to kill me in a restaurant. You betrayed everything my father built. Silvio raised trembling hands. It wasn't personal. It was survival. You were changing the business. Trying to go legitimate. Thomas's eyes hardened. And that upset you? The men liked the old ways, Silvio said desperately. Gomani, of fear. So you sold us to the Russians? Silvio's voice cracked. They offered protection. Thomas stopped 3 feet away. Protection from who? Silvio didn't answer. Instead, his eyes flicked toward the desk. A letter opener rested beside a stack of paperwork. You lunch? Thomas caught his wrist instantly. The bone snapped with a sickening crack. Silvio screamed. Thomas slammed him against the glass wall overlooking the warehouse. Who else? Thomas demanded. Who funded this? Malenkov wasn't rich enough to buy Thomas's shipping empire. Someone bigger was involved. Silvio gasped through broken breaths. Then a strange smile spread across his face. You don't know who she is. Thomas frowned. What? A girl. Catherine. That's not her real name. Thomas's grip tightened. What are you talking about? Silvio coughed weakly. Her father. Jack Hale. Recognition struck Thomas instantly. Jack Hale. A mercenary hired years ago by Thomas's father for a job overseas. A job that ended badly. A job where Jack Hale never returned. Silvio laughed weakly. She didn't save you tonight. She came to finish what her father started. Thomas's mind spun. Catherine. What? Before he could respond, a gunshot cracked through the glass. Silvio's head snapped backward. He collapsed instantly, dead before he hit the floor. Thomas turned. Catherine stood in the doorway. Her pistol smoked. Her arm bled from a grazing wound. He talked too much, she said quietly. Thomas stared at her. The silence between them changed. Trust cracked. Thou crept in. Did you hear what he said? Thomas asked. Catherine lowered the gun slowly. Ness? Is it true? She hesitated, then nodded. My name is Catherine Hale. Thomas felt the weight of that truth settle in the room. Did you come here to kill me? Her eyes met his. No. Then why were you watching me? She swallowed slowly. I wanted to see what kind of man you were. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Alas! Someone had reported the gunfire. Catherine glanced toward the window. We need to leave. Thomas didn't move. He stared at the woman who had saved his life twice tonight. A woman whose father had died because of his family. Are you my enemy? He asked quietly. Catherine's answer came just as quietly. I don't know yet. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. Not close yet, but close enough. The flashing lights would reach the docks soon, and when they did, the warehouse would become a crime scene. Bodies, weapons, a dead Russian boss, and the corpse of Thomas Vescari's most trusted advisor. Catherine wiped rain from her forehead with the back of her hand. Blood from the graze on her arm soaked slowly into her sleeve, but she ignored it. Pain could wait. Survival could not. We need to go, she said. Thomas didn't answer immediately. He stood over Silvio's body, staring down at the man who had betrayed him. For years Silvio had sat beside him at meetings. Shared drinks. Shared secrets. Now he lay dead at Thomas's feet. Was he telling the truth? Thomas asked. Catherine didn't pretend not to understand. Yes. Your father was Jack Hale. Yes. And my father left him to die. Silence filled the office. Rain rattled against the broken window. Thomas finally looked at her. His expression wasn't angry. It was searching. And you came here for revenge? Catherine shook her head. I came for answers. I still don't have them. Thomas studied her face. If she had wanted him dead, she'd had multiple opportunities tonight. The restaurant. The alley. The warehouse. Each time she had saved him instead. That fact mattered. Police will be here in 2 minutes, she said again. Decision time. Thomas took one last look at Silvio, then turned toward the door. Let's go! They exited through the back of the warehouse. The rain had intensified, falling in thick sheets that blurred the distant harbor lights. Thomas led her down a narrow metal staircase to the lower docks. A sleek black speedboat floated beside the pier. You keep emergency transport hidden at your crime scenes? Catherine asked. I plan for unpleasant evenings. She stepped aboard first. Thomas untied the rope and pushed the boat away from the dock. The engines roared to life. The vessel cut through the dark water like a blade. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. The wind whipped Catherine's hair loose from her bun. Thomas steered the boat across the bay toward a cluster of abandoned warehouses on the far shoreline. Finally, he broke the silence. You could have killed me tonight, Ness. But you didn't. No? What? Catherine looked out across the dark water. My father believed something, she said quietly. What? That power shows its truth in moments of fear. Thomas didn't interrupt. He told me men reveal themselves when death is close. And what did you see tonight? You didn't run. That's not unusual for me. No, she said. But when you had the chance to escape the warehouse, you didn't leave me behind. Thomas glanced at her. That surprised you? Ness? She looked back at him. My father's employer left him to die. Thomas understood the implication. You expected me to do the same. Ness? He turned his gaze back to the water. Then your father was wrong about at least one thing. But not all powerful men are cowards. The speedboat slowed as they approached a rusting pier. A derelict steel building loomed ahead. Thomas cut the engine. This place used to be a metal foundry, he said. No one comes here anymore. They stepped onto the pier. The building's interior smelled like oil and rust. But inside, the space had been quietly renovated. Emergency supplies, medical kits, weapons locked in metal cabinets. Catherine noticed something immediately. You planned for a war. Thomas shrugged. In my line of work, peace is temporary. She sat on a wooden crate and began cleaning the wound on her arm. Thomas watched her carefully. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? Most people are. Most people don't know you. And you though? No, she said. But I know this. She tied the bandage around her arm and stood. You're standing at a crossroads. Thomas raised an eyebrow. That sounds dramatic. Yes? She walked toward him slowly. Your father built an empire through fear. Thomas said nothing. Sylvia wanted to return to those methods. Yes? But you didn't. Catherine stopped in front of him. That's why he betrayed you. Thomas leaned against the metal table. So what's your point? My point is that power changes people. I'm aware. You can become the man your father was. Thomas's eyes darkened slightly. Huh? Or you can become something different. Silence settled between them again. Then Thomas asked the question that had been building in his mind all night. What do you want from me? Catherine didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked to the weapons cabinet and opened it. Inside were rifles, pistols, body armor. What? She closed the cabinet again. I don't want money. I have plenty. I don't want revenge. That would have been simpler. She turned back to him. I want truth. Thomas crossed his arms. And how exactly do you expect to get that? Catherine met his gaze steadily. By staying. The word hung in the air. Thomas blinked. You want to stay here? With you? That's dangerous. Ness? You might die. I'm aware. Thomas studied her for a long moment. You're serious. Ness? And what would you do? Help you find the rest of the traitors. He laughed softly. You assume there are more? There are always more. He couldn't argue with that. And in exchange? Catherine's voice became firm. 3 conditions. Thomas smiled faintly. You're negotiating with a Mafia boss. No, she said calmly. I'm setting boundaries. His smile faded. Go on. First, no civilians get hurt. Thomas didn't answer. Second, if I see you becoming the man your father was, I walk away. And the third? Her eye held his. You tell me the truth about what happened to my father. The room went completely silent. Thomas considered the woman standing in front of him. A waitress who had become a soldier. A stranger who had saved his life. A daughter whose father had died because of his family. You're asking a lot, he said. I'm offering a lot. He stepped closer. For the first time since they met, Thomas Vescari did something unusual. He nodded. All right. Catherine studied him carefully. You accept the conditions? Yes. Then we work together. Thomas extended his hand. She hesitated only a moment before shaking it. Neither of them realized it yet. But the handshake changed everything. Because at that moment, power had just agreed to kneel to truth. And that kind of agreement reshapes empires. Outside, rain continued to fall across the sleeping city. But far away, in a luxury penthouse office overlooking downtown Seattle, a man watched security footage from the restaurant attack. He paused the video on Catherine's face, then smiled slowly. Well, he murmured. So the waitress survived. He turned to the man beside him. Prepare the next move. Because the war that had started tonight was much larger than either Catherine or Thomas realized. Morning arrived gray and cold over Seattle. Rain still clung to the rooftops and harbor cranes like a stubborn ghost that refused to leave. Inside the abandoned foundry, Catherine had not slept. She sat at a metal table surrounded by documents Thomas had retrieved from hidden safes throughout the building. Shipping manifests, financial transfers, port authority schedules. Most people would see paperwork. Catherine saw patterns. Thomas leaned against a steel pillar, watching her work. You've been staring at those for 3 hours, he said. You found something? Catherine didn't answer immediately. She flipped another page. Then another. Finally, she looked up. Ness? Thomas stepped closer. Well, this coup wasn't about your territory. His brow furrowed. That makes no sense. It does if the goal wasn't to replace you. What an? Control you. Thomas crossed his arms. Explain. Catherine slid a document across the table. Look at the shipment routes. He scanned the paper. Those are mine. No. They were. She pointed at a series of financial codes printed beside each cargo entry. These accounts don't belong to your organization. Thomas's eyes narrowed. Who do they belong to? Catherine turned the paper toward him and tapped the name printed at the bottom. Marco Vescari. Thomas went completely still. My brother? Ness? No. The word came instantly. Too fast. Too certain. Catherine didn't argue. She simply slid another page toward him. Bank transfers. Millions of dollars moving through offshore accounts. All signed with Marco's digital authorization. Thomas read the documents twice. Then a third time. The room seemed colder now. My brother runs logistics, he said quietly. He controls shipping. Yes? That doesn't mean. He also knew your schedule. Thomas's jaw tightened. He would never try to kill me. Maybe not directly. But he funded the people who did. Thomas slammed his hand against the table. Metal rattled. No. Catherine remained calm. Emotion isn't evidence. He paced across the room, anger boiling beneath his control. You don't understand. Then help me. Thomas stopped walking. My father built this empire with brutality. I know. When he died, I tried to change things. She nodded slowly. Legitimate business. Less violence. And your brother disagreed. Thomas didn't answer. But the silence told her enough. Marco believed fear made people loyal. Yes? And you believed loyalty could exist without fear. Thomas looked at the floor. Yes? Catherine folded the documents. Then the answer becomes simple. Thomas raised his head. He didn't want the throne, she said quietly. He wanted the old empire back. The sound of tires crunching outside the foundry froze them both. Thomas walked quickly to the window. Two black SUVs pulled up near the entrance. He swore under his breath. That was fast. How many? Maybe 10. Catherine grabbed the pistol from the table. Your brother works quickly. Or someone tipped him off. Gunshots exploded against the metal door. The attackers had no intention of negotiating. Back exit, Thomas said. They ran through the rear hallway just as the main doors crashed open behind them. Men flooded inside. Professional. Disciplined. Not Russians this time. Thomas recognized the insignia on their jackets. His own organization. Marco's men. Split up, someone shouted. Catherine and Thomas burst outside into the rain. A gunman spotted them instantly. Though, Catherine fired twice without slowing. The man dropped. Color, Thomas shouted. An old pickup truck sat parked near the edge of the lot. They sprinted toward it. Bullets struck the pavement behind them. Catherine dove into the driver's seat. Thomas jumped into the passenger side. The engine roared. The truck tore across the muddy ground just as another SUV crashed through the gate behind them. They're not giving up, Thomas said. They can't. What? Because if we live long enough to reach the city. She finished the sentence. Your brother loses everything. Thomas watched the pursuing vehicles gaining behind them. 3 SUVs now. Armed men leaning from the windows. Take the bridge, he said. No? What? Too predictable. She swerved onto a narrow service road running along the water. The truck bounced violently over potholes. One SUV closed the distance. A gunman leaned out the window with a rifle. Catherine jerked the steering wheel suddenly. The truck slammed sideways into a row of stacked barrels. The barrels rolled across the road directly into the pursuing SUV. The driver lost control. The vehicle flipped violently into the ditch. 2 SUVs remained. Thomas reached under the seat. Pulled out a shotgun. You keep weapons and everything, Catherine said. You noticed. He leaned out the window. Fired once. The blast shattered the windshield of the nearest SUV. The vehicle swerved off the road. Only one remained now. Catherine turned sharply onto a narrow bridge leading back toward the city. Halfway across, she slammed the brakes. The truck spun sideways, blocking the road. The last SUV skidded to a stop 20 feet away. Armed men stepped out slowly. 6 of them. Rifles ready. Catherine stepped out of the truck calmly. Thomas followed. Rain poured around them. The leader of the gunmen lowered his weapon slightly. Mr. Vescari, he said respectfully. Your brother asked us to bring you in. Thomas's voice was calm. Alive? The man hesitated. If possible. Thomas glanced at Catherine. Negotiation seems unlikely. She sighed softly. Unfortunately. The gunmen raised their rifles. Then a new voice spoke behind them. That's enough. Everyone turned. A black sedan had rolled onto the bridge. The rear door opened. Marco Vescari stepped out. Thomas's younger brother looked almost identical to him. Same dark hair. Same sharp eyes. But Marco's smile held something colder. Hello, brother, Marco said. Thomas stared at him. You hired assassins. You betrayed the family business. Marco shrugged. You were turning us into accountants. Better than murderers. Marco laughed. Fear built our empire. Fear also destroys it. Marco looked at Catherine. And you must be the famous waitress. Catherine didn't move. Marco continued. My men say you're very impressive. I try. You know, Marco said thoughtfully, if you step away now, I might let you live. Catherine tilted her head slightly. That's generous. Thomas stepped forward. She's not part of this. Marco's smile widened. Oh, she absolutely is. He nodded toward the gunmen. Take them. The men moved forward. Catherine looked at Thomas calmly. Well, what? He asked. You said you wanted to be different from your father. Ness? She handed him the pistol. Then don't let your brother become him instead. Thomas took the weapon. His voice was quiet. Stay behind me. Catherine shook her head. No. For the first time, Thomas truly understood something. She wasn't following him. They were standing side by side. Partners. The gunmen rushed forward. The fight exploded across the rain-soaked bridge. And somewhere in the chaos, the empire of the Vescari family began to collapse. Rain hammered the bridge like falling gravel. Wind howled across the water. And for a moment, everything stood still. 2 brothers. 6 gunmen. 1 waitress who had refused to remain invisible. Marco Vescari smiled faintly, confident in the outcome. Numbers usually decided these situations. But numbers didn't account for Catherine. The first gunman rushed forward. Catherine moved before anyone else. Her foot kicked the truck door open violently, slamming it into the attacker's ribs. The man stumbled, and she disarmed him in the same motion, twisting the rifle free before striking him across the jaw with the stock. Thomas fired twice. 2 men dropped instantly. Marco's smile faded. The bridge erupted in chaos. Bullets cracked through the rain. Catherine ducked behind the truck, firing controlled shots that forced the gunmen to scatter. She wasn't shooting wildly. Every movement had purpose. Precision. Years of training she had tried to bury. Thomas fought differently. He fought like a man who had survived his entire life through brutality and instinct. But tonight something was different. He wasn't fighting for territory or power. He was fighting beside someone who had given him a choice. Another gunman rushed Catherine from the side. Thomas saw it first. Catherine. She turned just as the man raised his weapon. Thomas fired. The attacker collapsed. Catherine glanced at him briefly. Thanks. You're welcome. 3 men remained. They retreated toward Marco's sedan. One of them shouted, "Fall back." Marco raised his hand. No. His eyes never left Thomas. This ends tonight. He stepped forward slowly, rain soaking his expensive coat. Look at you, Marco said. You're defending the woman who exposed you. Thomas's voice stayed calm. She didn't expose me. She showed me the truth. Marco laughed bitterly. The truth? The truth is that power belongs to those willing to take it. Father understood that. Our father destroyed everything he touched, Thomas said quietly. He built an empire. No. He built a prison. Marco's smile twisted. You're weak. And you're afraid. Marco froze slightly. Thomas stepped closer. You couldn't win loyalty the way I did. So you tried to steal the throne. Marco's voice hardened. I'm saving the empire. You're destroying it. Silence stretched across the bridge. Finally, Marco raised a pistol. Soviet? The gun pointed straight at Thomas. But before he could fire, Catherine spoke. Marco. He glanced at her. That was the mistake. Her pistol cracked once. The bullet struck his shoulder. Marco collapsed to one knee, dropping the gun. The remaining gunmen froze. Catherine walked forward slowly, weapon steady. I don't kill men who still have a chance to choose differently, she said. Marco clutched his bleeding shoulder. You think you are better than us? No. I just refuse to become you. Police sirens screamed in the distance now. Blue lights flickered across the wet bridge. The gunmen lowered their weapons slowly. Marco stared up at Thomas. You'll regret this, he whispered. Thomas looked down at his brother. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he spoke quietly. Take him. The police cars screeched to a halt seconds later. Officers flooded the bridge. Guns drawn. But they stopped when they saw Thomas standing calmly beside the woman holding the pistol. Marco was handcuffed, dragged toward a squad car. As the officers secured the scene, one detective approached Thomas cautiously. Mr. Vescari. Nas? This is going to make the news. Thomas nodded. I imagine it will. The detective glanced at Catherine. And Thomas looked at Catherine. Rain still soaked her hair and jacket. Her arm bled through the bandage, but her expression was calm. She's the one who stopped a war tonight. 3 months later, Seattle looked different. Not cleaner. Not perfect. But different. Several high-ranking members of the Vescari organization had been arrested after Marco's financial records were exposed. Shipping companies were restructured. Illegal operations quietly dismantled. Many people were surprised that Thomas Vescari still controlled the remaining business empire. But those who understood power knew why. Because he had changed it. Not through fear. Through structure. Through rules. Through something his father had never believed in. Limits. One evening, Thomas sat at an outdoor table overlooking the harbor. The sunset painted the water gold. He heard footsteps behind him. You chose a quiet place. Catherine sat across from him. She wore simple clothes now. No apron. No gun. Just calm confidence. Thomas smiled slightly. You disappeared for a while. I needed to decide something. Oh. Catherine looked at the harbor. I was offered a lot of things. Thomas nodded. You deserve them. She looked back at him. Well, power, protection, and marriage. Thomas laughed softly. Ambitious list. She leaned forward slightly. But I realized something. Oh, I spent years hiding. Ness. And I'm not doing that anymore. Thomas studied her carefully. So what did you choose? Catherine smiled gently. Freedom. Thomas nodded. I expected that. But freedom doesn't mean leaving, she added. His eyebrows lifted slightly. No. She leaned back in the chair. You still owe me something. Thomas smiled faintly. My father's truth. Yes. He looked out across the harbor. Your father saved my father's life once. Catherine blinked. What? During a job overseas. Thomas continued quietly. My father betrayed him afterward because the people they worked for demanded silence. Her voice softened. And I can't change what my father did. But I can choose what happens next. Catherine watched him carefully. And what do you choose? Thomas looked directly at her. I choose the rules you gave me. No innocent people harmed. Truth over power. And loyalty proven through action. Catherine smiled. That's a good start. Thomas lifted his glass. To the waitress who ruined my empire. She raised hers. To the Mafia boss who decided to rebuild it. They clinked glasses. The sun dipped below the water. And for the first time since that violent night in the restaurant, everything felt quiet. Final reflection. People often think power belongs to the loudest voice in the room. The richest man. The most dangerous leader. But sometimes the person who changes everything is the one no one sees. The waitress. The cleaner. The quiet worker standing in the corner. Because silence is often mistaken for weakness. Until the moment truth decides to speak. And when truth stands up, even power must kneel. If you enjoyed this story of courage, loyalty, and the moment power bowed to truth, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story.